Okay, so we are going to begin chapter 4 today, and beginning with section 4.1, classifying triangles. I'm hoping that many of these terms will be familiar to you. You probably were exposed to them even way back in elementary school. And if not, just make note and pay attention to the definitions. Okay, so first thing we want to do is look at the different parts of a triangle. Okay, so here we have our triangle ABC. Whenever I'm asking you for the sides of a triangle, these are the segments. They are AB. Oh, don't forget to put the little segment line above. BC. And finally, the last side, which is AC. Okay, next we have the vertices. So whenever we're referring to a vertex, we're referring to a point. So we're saying point A, point B, and point C. So points A, B, and C. So again, vertices are points. Sides are segments. And then the last one should be self-explanatory. The angles are going to be angle A, angle B, and angle C. And you can use 3 letters to name those, but angle C. But because there's only one vertex at each of those angles, I can just use 1 letter. So sides, vertices, and angles. Okay, so we're going to classify triangles 2 ways. First, let's take a look at classifying triangles by their angles. So all triangles have at least 2 acute angles, and so the classification scheme depends on the identification and naming of the largest angle. So here we have it broken down. We have 4 different types. First one is acute. This is when all 3 angles are acute. So we can have maybe an example where, let's say this is 50 degrees, this one's 60 degrees, and this one's 70 degrees. All 3 angles are less than 90 degrees. Obtuse triangle, this is when we have 1 obtuse angle. So if I have more than 1 obtuse angle, it won't make a triangle. So here, let's say this is 110. That's an example of an obtuse triangle. Again, I don't need to know what those other 2 angles are. They have to be acute. Right triangle, we've already talked about. This is when we have 1 right angle. And to denote the right angle, we're going to put a little box in the corner. And lastly, we have an equiangular. So equal, right? Think about the first part being equal, and then angular, so all 3 angles are congruent. And in fact, when we have an equiangular triangle, automatically these 3 angles are all going to be 60-degree angles. Okay. So let's take a look at our example. We want to classify each triangle as acute, obtuse, right, or equiangular. So let's look at the first one, triangle ABC. Again, at any time, if you want to just pause it and see if you get the right answers, you can go ahead and do so. Triangle ABC, I notice I have a right angle in the corner, so that makes this a right triangle. Next one, we have FEC. So here's FEC. I see that it has a 120-degree angle, which is obtuse. Therefore, the triangle is obtuse. And lastly, we have DEF. So here's DEF. This one let's see. So, well, notice that we have a linear pair here. So if this is 120, this has to be 60. And this is also 120, so this has to be 60. Therefore, this third angle also has to be 60. So we are going to classify this as equiangular. Technically, it's also an acute triangle, but equiangular is a type of acute triangle, but I want to use the one that's going to best describe it, so that's why I'm going to go with more so with the equiangular. Next, we want to classify triangles by their sides. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at how many sides do we have congruent. So let's start with the first one, scalene. Scalene is when we have no congruent sides. So all three sides are a different length. So I could just use different tick marks in each of the sides. Isosceles is at least two congruent sides. So maybe I have these two sides, maybe this one is different. Notice it said at least two. That means if we have three congruent sides, it also falls under the isosceles triangle category. But we like to be more specific. When we have all three sides are congruent, we're going to call that equilateral. And so we can mark all three sides congruent to each other. Okay, so let's use those classifications to identify each triangle as scalene, isosceles, or equilateral. We know that D is the midpoint of AE. I'm just reading here. D is the midpoint of AE. So here's AE. If D is the midpoint, I see there's a 1 marking here, so I can put 1 mark there. And now let's take a look. We have triangle ABF. So here's ABF. I notice that they have 1, 2, 3 tick marks. They're all different. So we will say this is a scalene triangle. Next one we have DEF. Because each of these sides are congruent, we're going to have an equilateral triangle. Oops. And finally, last one, we have ADF. And I can see that we have two that are congruent, and the other side is different, so we're going to call this isosceles. Okay, just a couple more to go. We want to find the value of x, and then we're going to find the measure of each side of equilateral triangle, RST. Again, if you want to pause it, try this on your own, and then come back. Okay, so since it's equilateral, that means all three sides are congruent. Now, I have different expressions for each of the sides, but it doesn't matter. I can set any two sides equal to each other, and I should get the same value of x. So I'm going to choose x plus 9 and 2x, and I get x equals 9. And then since I want to find the value of each side, I'm just going to plug that 9 back in. So if I do 9 plus 9, so RS is 18, ST, 2 times 9 is 18, and RT, 3 times 9 is 27, minus 9 is 18. So here are the three side lengths. And last, we want to find x and the perimeter of isosceles triangle EFG. So since it's isosceles, and I see these two are marked congruent, I am going to set these two parts equal to each other. So we'll subtract 2x from both sides to get 2x equals 6. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals 3. Now, since I want to find the perimeter, I need to find EF and FG. If I plug 3 back in, that will make that 12. And 2 times 3, 6 plus 6 should also give us 12. We should get the same answer. And then perimeter, just remember that's when we add up all the sides. So I have 12 plus 14. So that's going to be 24 plus 14, which is 38, and then whatever the units are on there. Okay, so that is it for the first lesson. Real straightforward, pretty basic. And you're going to go to your assignments on MyJag, and you will see the worksheet for 4.1.